Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. This is my story, one I never thought I'd share, but maybe someone out there needs to hear it. What happened to me changed everything I believed in, about love, trust, and betrayal. So, here it goes. The late afternoon sun was doing that thing it does in early October, casting long, skeletal shadows across the backyard as I raked leaves. It was a Saturday, crisp and cool, the kind of day that usually made me feel content. We'd been in the house for 10 years, Sarah and I. 10 years of shared coffees on the porch, of whispered arguments and loud laughter, of planting a garden that never quite thrived the way we hoped. Our two kids, Emily, who was 8, and Tom, 6, were at Sarah's sister's place for a sleepover, a rare treat that left the house quiet, almost unnervingly so. I was trying to get the last of the fall cleanup done before the first frost hit. The rake tines scraped against something hard, not a rock, but something with a different give. I bent down, pushing aside a pile of damp maple leaves. There, nestled in the dirt, was a small, dark square. It was a SIM card, or what was left of one. One corner was melted, bubbled, and warped, the gold contacts on the other side scratched and dull. Strange. We hadn't had a bonfire or burned anything in the yard for months. My first thought was that it must have fallen out of an old phone, maybe one of the kids' discarded toys, though they didn't have toys with SIM cards. I picked it up, turning the charred piece of plastic over in my calloused fingers. It felt wrong, out of place. A little tremor of unease, nothing I could name, just a faint signal in the background noise of my mind. I nearly tossed it in the leaf bag, but something made me hesitate. A burned SIM card. Why would a SIM card be burned? And why here, in our backyard, a place I thought I knew every inch of? I slipped it into my jeans pocket, the metallic tang of burnt plastic clinging to my fingers, and continued raking, but the rhythm was gone. The sun dipped lower, and the chill in the air felt suddenly more personal, more invasive. That night, the house felt too big. The silence, usually a welcome respite, was heavy, pressing in on me. Sarah was out, a girls' night, she'd said. They'd become more frequent lately, these girls' nights. I hadn't thought much of it. She worked hard as a marketing manager, a demanding job, and deserved to unwind. We'd been married for 12 years, together for 15. We were college sweethearts, the couple everyone said was rock solid. We'd weathered financial storms, the stress of new parenthood, the death of my father. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our quiet understanding of each other. Or so I believed. Lately things had been different. Not bad, not overtly, but just off. A subtle shift in the atmosphere of our marriage, like a barometer dropping before a storm you can't yet see. She'd been more distracted, often on her phone, a secretive smile playing on her lips that she'd quickly wipe away if I looked up. When I asked, it was always just work or something funny my sister sent. Her touch had become less frequent, her laughter a little more strained. I'd chalked it up to stress, to the demands of her career, to the general wear and tear of a long-term relationship. Maybe I hadn't wanted to see anything else. Maybe I'd been complacent, too comfortable in the assumption that our foundation was unshakable. We hadn't had a serious argument in months, but the absence of conflict wasn't peace. It was a quiet, simmering distance I'd chosen to ignore. I found an old SIM card reader in a drawer full of obsolete tech. Ancient chargers, tangled earbuds, a Palm Pilot I couldn't bring myself to throw away. The burned card was a micro SIM. My current phone used a nano. It took some fiddling, a delicate touch, given the damage. Part of me, a significant part, was screaming that this was crazy, that I was being paranoid, that I should just throw the damned thing away and forget about it. It was probably nothing, just a piece of trash. But another part of me, the part that had felt that cold dread in the backyard, Couldn't let it go. The computer word. The card reader blinked. For a moment, nothing. Then, an icon popped up on the screen. New device detected. My breath hitched. My heart started a frantic rhythm against my ribs. It was like peering into a dark room, knowing something was in there, but not knowing what. My hand hovered over the mouse, a strange reluctance mixed with a compelling, almost sickening, urge to know. What if it was just junk? What if it was corrupted beyond recovery? What if it was something that would blow my world apart? The questions circled, vultures in my mind. I thought of Sarah, her easy smile, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the scent of her shampoo on the pillows in the morning. This couldn't be happening. Not to us. Not to Sarah. There had to be a simple explanation. A lost card from an old phone of hers, accidentally dropped, and then singed by a stray spark from a neighbor's barbecue. Maybe. My mind scrambled for logical, innocent scenarios, each one more flimsy than the last. The truth was, the burning was what made it sinister. It implied intent, a desire to destroy. I clicked. The files were a mess, many corrupted, which wasn't surprising given the SIM card's condition. But some data was salvageable. Contact lists, a few garbled call logs. And then the text messages. My blood ran cold, a sudden, shocking plunge into icy water. The first few were innocuous enough, work-related, appointment reminders. I almost sighed in relief. Maybe I was just being a paranoid idiot. Then I scrolled further down, into older messages, messages that had somehow survived the heat. The sender was simply M. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Can't stop thinking about last night. My breath hitched. Last night? What last night? My mind raced, trying to align dates, trying to make sense of it. Another message from M. You were incredible. Counting the minutes until I can see you again. My stomach churned. This wasn't Sarah. This couldn't be her. I scrolled, a desperate, sickening compulsion driving my finger on the mouse wheel. Message from Sarah, or rather, from this SIM card which I was beginning to realize was her secret. Me neither. It's getting so hard to pretend when I'm at home. Home. With me. Pretend. The word was a punch to the gut, winding me, leaving me gasping for air. The room started to spin. I felt a wave of nausea so intense I had to grip the edge of the desk to steady myself. There were more. Dozens more. Messages filled with longing, with illicit plans, with shared jokes that weren't ours. Explicit details of encounters, praise for things I didn't even know she liked. They spoke of hotel rooms, of clandestine meetings during her work lunches or those girls' nights out. Each message was a fresh stab, twisting the knife deeper into my chest. The sheer volume of them, the casual intimacy, the depth of the deception, it was overwhelming. It was like watching a movie of a life I didn't recognize, starring the woman I thought I knew better than anyone else in the world. The dates on the messages stretched back months. Months. All those times she'd seemed distant, all those late nights at the office, all those unexplained smiles while texting. It all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. I wasn't just a husband. I was a fool. A blind, trusting fool. The affair was not a fleeting mistake. It was a calculated, ongoing betrayal. I felt a rage building inside me, so potent it was almost a physical force, starting in my belly and rising up into my throat, choking me. How could she? How could she do this to me, to our family, to everything we had built? The image of her smiling face, the one I had cherished for 15 years, was now tainted, overlaid with the ugly reality of her deceit. I saw him's name in her regular phone contacts, disguised as Mark Jenkins' new client. A common enough name. He'd even called the house a few times, and she'd taken the calls in another room, always saying it was a demanding new account. The audacity of it. The sheer, cold-blooded nerve. I felt like I was going to be sick. I stumbled to the bathroom, my legs shaking, and barely made it to the toilet before I retched, the acrid taste of bile filling my mouth. The face that stared back at me from the mirror was a stranger, pale, haunted, eyes wide with a mixture of fury and unspeakable pain. The pieces were all there, scattered across the cracked screen of my understanding. The burned SIM card, a desperate attempt to erase the evidence, probably dropped and lost in her haste. The increasingly frequent nights out, the guarded phone, the subtle, almost imperceptible cooling in our intimacy, which I had so readily dismissed. It was a textbook case, and I'd been too oblivious, too wrapped up in my own comfortable assumptions to read the signs. The betrayal wasn't just the physical act. It was the intricate web of lies she had spun around me, around our life. Every shared memory now felt contaminated. Every "I love you" she'd uttered in the past few months echoed in my mind as a hollow mockery. How long had she planned to keep this up? What was her endgame? Did she ever love me? Or was our whole marriage, our whole life together, just a comfortable life for her while she sought excitement elsewhere? The questions were a torment, each one a fresh wave of agony. I wanted to smash something, to scream until my lungs burned. But I also felt a profound, crushing sadness, a weight that settled deep in my bones. The woman I loved, the mother of my children, was a stranger, and I had just discovered her darkest secret, burned and buried, in our own backyard. The silence of the house was no longer just quiet. It was the silence of a tomb. The hours that followed the discovery were a blur of raw, unprocessed emotion. I remember pacing the length of our living room, back and forth, like a caged animal. The image of those messages, the casual cruelty of her words, the sheer depth of her deception, played on a loop in my mind. Sleep was an impossibility. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with him, laughing, touching, sharing secrets that should have been ours. The M on the SIM card. Mark, the new client. I even remembered shaking his hand once. She brought into a company picnic a couple of months back. He was younger, smoother, with that easy charm that probably impressed clients and, apparently, my wife. I'd thought nothing of it at the time, just another colleague. Now, the memory of his polite smile and firm handshake made my skin crawl. The casualness of it, introducing her lover to her husband. The sheer, unadulterated gall. My mind, in a desperate attempt to make sense of the senseless, started replaying our entire history, searching for cracks, for warnings I'd missed. Were there signs earlier? Had I been blind? Or just willfully ignorant? We'd had our ups and downs, like any couple. There were periods of stress, especially when the kids were babies, or when financial pressures mounted. But I'd always believed we were a team, that we faced things together. The realization that she had been leading a double life, possibly for months, shattered that illusion completely. The Sarah I knew, the loving mother, the supportive partner, my best friend, seemed to have vanished, replaced by a calculating stranger. The emotional toll was immediate and devastating. One moment I'd be consumed by a white-hot rage, wanting to confront her, to scream, to demand answers. The next, I'd be overwhelmed by a profound sadness, a grief so potent it felt like a physical weight on my chest. How could the woman who had shared my bed for 12 years, who knew my deepest fears and my fondest dreams, betray me so completely? I felt like a fool, a naive, trusting idiot who had been played for months. The trust, the very bedrock of our relationship, was not just broken, it was annihilated. It felt like our entire shared history, all the good memories, were now tainted, viewed through the sickening filter of her affair. Did she mean any of it? Any of the laughter, any of the affection, any of the whispered, "I love yous," in the dark? The practical implications started to seep in, cold and unwelcome. Our house, the one we'd poured so much love and effort into. Our finances, so carefully intertwined. And the kids. Oh God, the kids. Emily and Tom. How would this affect them? The thought of their innocent faces, their unwavering belief in their parents, was like another knife twisting in my gut. How could she risk their happiness, their sense of security, for a cheap thrill? The urge to confront her immediately was almost overpowering. I imagined smashing the burned SIM card down on the table, watching her face as the truth unraveled. But then what? A screaming match? More lies? More deceit? No, I needed to be smart about this. I needed evidence, irrefutable proof, not just a damaged SIM card that she could deny or explain away. The messages were there, but I needed them in a format that couldn't be easily dismissed. I spent the rest of that torturous night carefully documenting everything. I took screenshots of the messages, saved the raw data from the SIM card onto a secure flash drive, even took pictures of the card itself, showing the burn marks. My hands trembled as I did it, a mixture of fury and a strange, cold detachment taking over. It was like I was an outside observer, watching someone else's life crumble. By dawn, I was exhausted, emotionally drained, but a grim resolve had begun to solidify. I wouldn't let her destroy me. I wouldn't let her walk away from this unscathed, leaving me to pick up the pieces of our shattered life while she moved on to her next adventure. The initial shock was beginning to give way to a harder, colder anger. The kind of anger that demanded not just answers, but consequences. When Sarah came home late the next morning, looking tired, but with that same faintly secretive smile I now recognized as the mark of her deceit, I had to use every ounce of self-control not to explode. She yawned, stretched, and said, "Morning, sleepyhead." Girls' night was wild. We ended up at that new karaoke bar downtown. You should have heard Karen try to sing Bon Jovi. The lie was so easy, so casual. It was like I was invisible, my pain, my earth-shattering discovery, completely unknown to her. I just nodded, mumbled something about being tired, and watched her. Every gesture, every word, was now suspect. Her hug felt hollow, her kiss on my cheek a betrayal. The mundane routine of our Sunday morning, coffee, newspapers, the distant sounds of cartoons as the kids would soon be home, felt like a cruel parody. I was living in a nightmare, wide awake, and she was the architect of it. I needed a plan. Confrontation was inevitable, but it had to be on my terms, when I was ready, when I had all my ducks in a row. This wasn't just about my broken heart anymore. It was about protecting myself, protecting my children, and ensuring that justice, in some form, was served. The burned SIM card was just the beginning. It was the key that had unlocked the door to her secret world, and now I had to walk through it, however painful it might be, to uncover the full extent of her betrayal before I made my move. The house felt different, charged with unspoken truths, heavy with my silent, agonizing knowledge. The days that followed were a special kind of hell. I was living with the enemy, sharing a bed with a woman who was a complete stranger to me. Every interaction was a performance. I had to feign normalcy, to smile, to engage in small talk, all while my insides were being ripped apart. The hardest part was the kids. Emily and Tom were oblivious, their innocent joy a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within me. I'd watch Sarah with them, laughing at their silly jokes, helping them with their homework, and a fresh wave of rage and confusion would wash over me. How could she be this loving mother and simultaneously this deceitful, callous adulteress? Was any of it real? I started paying closer attention to her habits, her schedule, her phone. It was an ugly, obsessive state to be in, like I was some kind of private investigator in my own life. The late nights at work and dinners with clients now had a sinister undertone. Her phone, once casually left on the kitchen counter, was now her constant companion, always angled away from me, often silenced or put on vibrate. If I walked into a room while she was texting, she'd quickly close the app or turn the screen off. The signs had always been there, I realized with a sickening lurch, but I had been too trusting, too busy, too comfortable. I had taken our marriage for granted, assuming its foundations were solid. Now, I saw the cracks everywhere. I needed more than just the messages from the burned SIM. While damning, she could still try to deny them, claim the SIM was old, lost, or even planted. I needed something current, something undeniable. I consulted a lawyer, discreetly. The first meeting was brutal. laying out the sordid details to a stranger, hearing the cold, legalistic terms for betrayal and divorce, irretrievable breakdown, division of assets, child custody made it all sickeningly real. My lawyer, a pragmatic woman named Miss Davies, advised me to gather as much concrete evidence as possible, especially if I wanted to understand the full scope and protect my interests and the children's future. She explained that in our no-fault divorce state, infidelity wouldn't necessarily impact the division of assets significantly, but it could be relevant in custody discussions if her behavior demonstrated poor judgment or neglect. And it would certainly give me leverage in negotiations. It wasn't about revenge in the legal sense, she cautioned, but about ensuring a fair outcome. I wasn't sure if I wanted revenge. At that point, the pain was so raw, I just wanted it to stop. I wanted to understand why. I wanted the woman I married back, even as I knew she was gone forever. One evening, Sarah announced she had another important client dinner. This was becoming a weekly occurrence. My jaw tightened, but I just nodded, kissed the kids goodnight, and waited. An hour after she left, looking stunning in a new dress I hadn't seen before, I made my decision. The need to know, to see it with my own eyes, was a gnawing hunger. I called my sister, Carol, my voice strained, and asked if she could come over and stay with the kids. I mumbled something about a plumbing emergency I needed to check on at one of my rental properties. Carol, bless her, didn't ask too many questions, just said she'd be right over. Once Carol arrived, I drove. I didn't know where Mark lived, but I knew the fancy new Italian restaurant downtown that Sarah had mentioned was a favorite of her new client. It was a long shot. As I drove, my heart hammered against my ribs. What was I doing? What if I saw them? What would I do? Part of me hoped I wouldn't find them, that this was all some horrible misunderstanding. But the burned SIM card in my pocket, a constant, nagging reminder, told me otherwise. I parked a block away from the restaurant, my hands clammy on the steering wheel. The street was busy, Friday night crowds milling about. I felt like a creep, skulking in the shadows. After about 20 minutes of watching the entrance, just as I was about to give up, I saw them. Sarah emerged, laughing, her head tilted back, her hand resting intimately on Mark's arm. He was leaning in, whispering something in her ear that made her giggle, a light, carefree sound that twisted my stomach into knots. It was them, undeniably. They weren't in work attire. This was a date. They strolled down the sidewalk, oblivious to my presence, looking for all the world like a happy couple. They turned into a smaller, darker side street. My blood ran cold. I knew that street. It led to the Marlowe, one of the city's boutique hotels, known for its discreet atmosphere. I followed, on foot this time, keeping my distance, my heart pounding a furious rhythm against my ribs. My breath came in ragged gasps. The cool night air felt like ice in my lungs. And then I saw it. They walked up the steps to the Marlowe, Mark's arm now around her waist, pulling her close. They paused at the entrance, and he kissed her, a long, lingering kiss under the soft glow of the hotel lights. It wasn't a friendly peck. It was the kiss of a lover. In that moment, something inside me shattered. The last vestiges of hope, of denial, crumbled into dust. This was real. This was happening. I stood there, frozen, watching them disappear inside. The pain was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs, leaving me gasping. It was a primal agony, a tearing of something deep within my soul. I didn't scream. I didn't run after them. I just stood there, in the shadows, as the reality of my wife's betrayal burned itself into my memory. The image of that kiss, framed by the entrance of that hotel, would haunt my nightmares for a long time to come. I turned and walked back to my car, each step heavy, laden with a grief and a rage so profound I could barely breathe. The fight wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. But tonight, the discovery was complete. I had seen the truth with my own eyes. There was no going back. The drive home from the Marlowe was a blur. I don't remember much of it, just the searing image of Sarah and Mark, that kiss, replaying in my mind like a broken record. Each replay was a fresh stab to the heart. When I got back, Carol was reading on the sofa, the kids fast asleep. She looked up, saw my face, and her expression immediately shifted from casual concern to deep alarm. "What happened?" she asked, her voice soft. I couldn't speak. The words wouldn't come. I just sank onto the armchair opposite her, the carefully constructed dam of my composure finally breaking. The story tumbled out, disjointed at first, a torrent of pain, anger, and disbelief. The burned SIM card, the messages, tonight. Carol listened patiently, her eyes filled with a mixture of shock and sympathy. She'd always liked Sarah. We all had. To her credit, she didn't offer platitudes or easy answers. She just listened, offering a quiet presence that was more comforting than any words could have been. When I finally finished, exhausted and emotionally raw, she simply said, "I am so sorry." "What are you going to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do? The initial shock had given way to a cold, hard anger. The kind of anger that clarifies rather than confuses. I knew I couldn't stay in this marriage. I couldn't unsee what I'd seen, couldn't unknow what I knew. The trust was gone, pulverized. But a simple divorce felt insufficient. It felt like letting her off too easily. She had systematically dismantled our life, our family, with her lies and deceit. There had to be consequences beyond just the dissolution of our marriage. The confrontation happened 2 days later. I'd spent the interim meticulously preparing, guided by Ms. Davies' advice and my own simmering need for control. I had printed out the messages from the SIM card. I had the photographs of her and Mark outside the restaurant, and then the hotel, time-stamped, undeniable. I had a detailed log of her suspicious absences, her late nights, and client dinners. I waited until the kids were at school. Sarah was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she made coffee, the picture of domestic bliss. The normalcy of it was a cruel joke. I walked in, placed a manila envelope on the granite countertop, and said, "We need to talk, Sarah." My voice was eerily calm, devoid of the storm raging inside me. She looked up, a flicker of surprise, maybe a hint of apprehension in her eyes. "Okay," she said, cautiously. "What's up?" I pushed the envelope towards her. "Open it." She picked it up, her brow furrowed. As she pulled out the contents, the color drained from her face. Her hand flew to her mouth as she saw the photos, the printed messages. The humming stopped. The kitchen, a moment before filled with the aroma of coffee and the illusion of a normal morning, became a courtroom. Her eyes darted from the evidence to my face, wide with panic, then with a dawning, sickening realization. Where did you get this?" she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "Does it matter?" I replied, my voice still level, though it took every ounce of my self-control. "Is it true?" For a moment, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Defiance? Was she actually going to try and lie her way out of this? Then, her shoulders slumped. The fight seemed to go out of her. "Yes," she whispered, tears welling up. "It's true." The admission, though expected, still hit me like a punch. There was no screaming, no throwing of plates, not yet. Just a heavy, suffocating silence broken only by her quiet sobs. "Why, Sarah?" I finally asked, the question that had been burning in my soul. "Why would you do this to us?" To the kids. Her explanations, when they came, were a pathetic tapestry of cliches. She'd felt neglected, she said. Unseen. The spark had gone. Mark made her feel alive, desired. It was all about her feelings, her needs. There was no remorse for the pain she had inflicted, no real understanding of the devastation she had caused. It was just a litany of excuses, each one more self-serving than the last. That's when the anger, the cold, controlled anger I'd been nursing, finally broke through. Neglected? I spat the word out. I worked my backside off to provide for this family, to give you the life you wanted. I supported your career, took on more than my share with the kids so you could climb the corporate ladder. And this is how you repay me? By sneaking around with some office Lothario? The argument escalated then, the raw emotion finally erupting. Accusations flew. Tears were shed, hers of self-pity, mine of rage and heartbreak. She tried to gaslight me, to twist things around, to make it seem like I was somehow responsible for her choices. But I had the evidence. I had the truth. And I wasn't backing down. By the end of it, we were both exhausted, shattered. The truth was out, ugly and undeniable. I told her I wanted a divorce. I told her I would be fighting for primary custody of the kids. Her face crumpled at that. The kids were her Achilles heel, the one area where her selfishness might, just might, give way to some semblance of maternal concern. You can't do that, she sobbed. They need their mother. They also need a father who isn't being constantly lied to and betrayed, I retorted. And they need a mother who prioritizes them over her affairs. That night, she slept in the guest room. The house felt like a war zone, heavy with unspoken resentments and the ghosts of what used to be. The practical aftermath began almost immediately. We had to tell the kids, a conversation I dreaded more than anything. We sat them down together, a united front for the last time, and explained, as gently as possible, that Mommy and Daddy wouldn't be living together anymore. Their confusion, their tears, were a fresh hell. Emily, always the more perceptive one, asked, "Is it because you don't love each other anymore?" Sarah looked away, unable to meet her daughter's gaze. I pulled Emily close. "Sometimes grown-ups change, sweetie," I said, my voice thick with unshed tears. "But we will always, always love you and Tom. That will never change." It was a hollow comfort, I knew, but it was all I had to offer. The next few weeks were a painful blur of lawyer meetings, financial disclosures, and the awkward, tense dance of two people living separate lives under the same roof. Sarah moved out a month later, into a small apartment across town. The relief of her absence was palpable, but so was the gaping hole she left behind. The house felt empty, haunted. The plan for justice, or perhaps revenge, I wasn't sure what to call it anymore, began to take shape. It wasn't just about the divorce. It was about exposing the truth, not just for my own vindication, but for everyone else she had fooled. The initial shock and the raw pain of the confrontation eventually began to coalesce into a steely resolve. Sarah had made her choices, and now she had to face the consequences. My lawyer, Miss Davies, was a godsend. She was no-nonsense, focused, and fiercely protective of my interests and, more importantly, the children's. We agreed that a quiet, dignified divorce was preferable, but not at the expense of fairness. The evidence I had gathered, the SIM card messages, the photos, the hotel receipts I later found, painted a clear picture of her infidelity. While our state was no fault for divorce, meaning her affair didn't legally entitle me to a larger share of marital assets by default, it did provide leverage. It showed her character, her priorities, and could potentially influence custody if it demonstrated a pattern of irresponsibility or placing her own desires above the children's welfare. The justice part, for me, wasn't about public humiliation or vindictive cruelty. It was about ensuring the truth was known by the people who mattered, and that she couldn't simply rewrite the narrative to paint herself as a victim or me as the unreasonable party. It was also about Mark. He wasn't an innocent bystander. He was an active participant in the destruction of my family. I discovered through some discreet inquiries, a friend of a friend who worked at Sarah's company, that Mark was also married. His wife, a woman named Jennifer, apparently had no idea about her husband's extracurricular activities. This felt like a line I had to consider carefully. Did I have a moral obligation to tell her? Or was that meddling in someone else's life an act of pure revenge? I wrestled with this. Ultimately, I decided that if I were in Jennifer's shoes, I would want to know. Ignorance wasn't bliss, it was a lie. So, I composed an anonymous email. I laid out the facts calmly, attached a couple of non-explicit but undeniable photos of Sarah and Mark together on their dates, and suggested Jennifer might want to look into her husband's recent activities. I didn't use inflammatory language. I just presented the information. I sent it from a throwaway email account and never looked back. Whether she acted on it or not was her decision, her life. My part was done. For Sarah, the consequences began to unfold more directly. During our mediation sessions, her initial attempts to portray herself as a wronged wife looking for an amicable split quickly crumbled when Ms. Davies calmly presented the timeline of the affair, backed by my evidence. Sarah's lawyer, who had probably been fed a very different version of events, looked increasingly uncomfortable. The leverage worked. Sarah agreed to me having primary physical custody of Emily and Tom. She would have generous visitation. Of course, I never wanted to keep them from their mother, but their primary home, their stability, would be with me. This was my biggest victory, the one that mattered most. The house, which we had jointly owned, became another point of contention. She wanted her half of the equity, naturally. I didn't want to uproot the kids. In the end, I agreed to buy out her share, which meant taking on a larger mortgage, but it was worth it to keep the children in their familiar environment. The financial cost was significant, but the emotional stability it offered Emily and Tom was priceless. Then there was the matter of her reputation. Sarah worked in marketing, an industry where perception and networking are crucial. The news of our impending divorce and the reasons behind it inevitably began to circulate among our mutual acquaintances and, more damagingly for her, within her professional circles. I never actively spread rumors. I didn't have to. I simply told the truth, calmly and factually, when asked by close friends or family. The story of a burned SIM card found in the backyard, leading to the discovery of a long-term affair, was dramatic enough to travel on its own. Some of her friends, the ones who had enabled or covered for her girls' nights that were actually trysts, slowly distanced themselves. The affair partner, Mark, also faced repercussions. The anonymous email to his wife apparently had an effect. I heard through the grapevine at Sarah's company that Mark's marriage had imploded. Shortly after, he was restructured out of his job. Whether it was due to the scandal, or if his performance had suffered due to his personal turmoil, I never found out for sure. But it felt like a small measure of justice. The most satisfying moment of revenge, if you can call it that, was more subtle. It happened during our final mediation session. Sarah was trying to negotiate for a piece of sentimental furniture, a beautiful antique writing desk that had been in my family for generations. She claimed it had been a gift to her. I knew it wasn't. It was a family heirloom I had intended to pass down to Emily. Ms. Davies calmly pointed out that there was no record of it being a gift, and that its provenance was clearly with my family. Sarah started to argue, her voice rising, trying to play the victim. I looked her straight in the eye and said, quietly but firmly, "Sarah, you've taken enough from this family. You're not taking this too." There was a moment of stunned silence. Her lawyer tried to interject, but Sarah just deflated. She knew she had no ground to stand on, no moral currency left. She conceded. It was a small thing, a piece of furniture. But in that moment, I felt like I had reclaimed a tiny piece of my dignity, a piece of my history that she had tried to co-opt. The divorce was finalized 6 months after I found that burned SIM card. 6 months of emotional hell, legal wrangling, and painful adjustments. But when I walked out of the courthouse that day, I didn't feel triumph. I felt a profound sense of relief, mixed with a lingering sadness for what had been lost. The justice wasn't about destroying Sarah. It was about protecting myself and my children, about ensuring the truth prevailed over lies, and about holding her accountable for her actions in a way that allowed me to move forward. The burned SIM card had been a catalyst for immense pain, but it had also been the key to uncovering a truth that, however devastating, ultimately set me free. Looking back now, a couple of years down the line, life is different. The raw, gaping wound of betrayal has healed into a scar, a reminder of the pain, yes, but also a testament to survival. I'd be lying if I said I was completely over it. Some days, a stray memory or a particular song can still bring a faint echo of that initial shock and heartbreak. But those moments are fewer and further between. The house, once a place filled with tense silences and unspoken accusations, now feels like home again. It's filled with the laughter of Emily and Tom, with the comforting routines of our new normal. They adapted better than I could have hoped. Kids are resilient. They still see Sarah regularly, and while our relationship is strictly co-parenting, focused solely on their well-being, we manage to be civil for their sake. She seems to be existing. I don't know much about her personal life, and frankly, I don't care to. My focus has been on rebuilding my own and on creating a stable, loving environment for my children. The revenge, or justice, that I sought and achieved wasn't about fiery retribution. It was about reclaiming my narrative, my dignity, and my future. It was about ensuring that the truth wasn't buried along with that burned SIM card. Exposing the affair to those who needed to know, including Mark's unsuspecting wife, felt like bringing a necessary, albeit painful, light into dark corners. Securing primary custody of my kids was the most important victory. Seeing them thrive, knowing they are safe and loved, is my daily reward. The lessons learned from this whole ordeal are profound. I learned that trust, once shattered, is incredibly difficult, perhaps impossible, to fully rebuild with the person who broke it. I learned that I am stronger than I ever thought possible. Facing such a profound betrayal and navigating the emotional and legal labyrinth that followed forced me to dig deep, to find reserves of resilience I didn't know I possessed. I learned the importance of paying attention, not just to the grand gestures, but to the subtle shifts in a relationship. I had been complacent, too quick to dismiss the warning signs. That's a mistake I won't make again. I also learned about the kindness of others. My sister Carol, who was my rock, Ms. Davies, my lawyer, who fought for me with such tenacity, my friends who rallied around me, offering support without judgment. Professionally, I'm doing well. After the initial turmoil, I threw myself into my work, perhaps as a coping mechanism, but it paid off. Personally, I've started to cautiously explore life again. I've reconnected with old hobbies, made some new friends. Dating? Not yet. The thought still feels a bit daunting. Maybe someday. For now, my priority is my kids and my own healing. The reflection in the mirror these days is of a man who has been through a fire and come out the other side, changed, certainly, but not destroyed. There's a sadness in my eyes that wasn't there before, but there's also a newfound strength, a quiet confidence. I don't take things for granted anymore. I appreciate the small joys, the moments of peace, the unwavering love of my children. That burned SIM card was a symbol of deceit and destruction, but in a strange way, it was also a catalyst for a new beginning. It forced me to confront an ugly truth, to dismantle a life built on lies, and to start building something new, something more authentic, on a foundation of honesty and self-respect. I lost a wife, yes, and a version of a life I thought I wanted. But in the process, I found a deeper understanding of myself and a clearer vision of what truly matters. The path to healing is long, and it's not always linear. There are good days and bad days, but I'm walking it, one step at a time. And for the first time in a long time, I feel a sense of hope for the future. Looking back, I realize I lost a part of myself, but I also found something stronger. If you've ever been betrayed, know this: you're not alone, and healing is possible. Thank you for listening to my story. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real stories like this one. Until next time, take care of yourself.